of her managing to sandwich herself onto the stage, and it's the most awkward video ever. Tom will know exactly which one I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, we all saw it, yeah. Well, Paulette, you think this is unfair?
I do. Look at the headlines. I think the tone of the headlines, whenever people talk about Meghan, they never have a positive word to say about her. She has done a lot of good, but none of that ever gets commented on.
Is she serving herself? That seems to be the thrust of the
good she's done.
Yeah,
For me, she has inspired quite a lot of people of colour, because who would have ever thought a woman of colour would ever make it to the palace? And people treat Harry as if he's an idiot. This man is a grown man, and he is, I'm hoping, the man of his house. And at the end of the day, if he wasn't happy with what she was doing, they would have those discussions. But what I'm not happy with, it's just the tone of all of this. It's very distasteful. The UK, Britain should be a better place than that,
Tom,
and be
defend.
tolerant.
Go on.
Well, I think the point is that she lied about the colour discussion of Archie's skin and called the royal family racist on absolutely bogus grounds. And in my book, I show she went, for example, to Nigeria in a so-called royal tour and sat with the generals in charge of Nigeria and told them what a racist country Britain is. Now, Paulette, you can say that we're very racist. Perhaps I don't think Britain is a racist country. I know she was not treated in a racially offensive way whatsoever. Everyone tried very, very hard to make her feel at home as part of the royal family.
But do you not think racism is perception? I've always said Britain, the UK is a very tolerant country. Yet on Saturday, I had a man, I was door knocking, that was absolutely racist towards me and couldn't recognise what he was saying. And sometimes it's the perception, it's how that person is feeling at that time. Now, she is feeling a lot of pressure that in the UK, everything is against her. And what I'm saying to you is, I know that she hasn't done everything right. I won't sit here and say she's an angel. But what I'm saying is, the way this country has attacked her has been absolutely disgusting. And not the whole country, by the way.
Do you not think that someone with a victim mentality like Meghan would almost roll out the race card and use that as an opportunity to be a victim? Because it's actually something that's very, very hard for us to defend. Because I haven't experienced racism, so how can I comment on it? I feel like Meghan uses it, she weaponises it.
It's whether, I mean, I look at these pictures. You say, Tom, that the Queen, the current Queen, says that Meghan brainwashed Harry.
Yes, I think when Harry met Meghan, he was the man still beloved by the public. Yeah. The man who played with children, played with games and things, was a terrific counsellor to wounded soldiers, was himself a great leader in his own way in Afghanistan as a co-pilot. And then she began realising that she wasn't going to be the Queen. She began realising she was not going to live in great luxury. So she had a grievance against Kate, she had a grievance against the royal family.
Do you think she misunderstood? She thought Harry was possibly going to be king?
She couldn't understand why she, as the great meritocrat, the person who'd worked her way up, shouldn't be queen and that Kate should. And so in the end what happened was that she created within Harry grievances. Everything was wrong. That she only had a 2-bedroom house, William had a much bigger house, and nothing was right. And so he became unhappy. And that's why, in the end, it fueled the idea of them moving quickly out.
I always think all of this goes back to Diana, you know. Do you feel the same?
Well, I think she basically saw Diana and saw that Diana was a celebrity and she thought she could be a royal celebrity. But being a royal is not being a celebrity.
She came into the family and she was a celebrity. The point is, the attacks came pretty much straight after a wedding and it never stopped. And unless you are a superhuman being, it got to her in the end. And as it got to her, it got to her husband. It wasn't about the fact that her husband was brainwashed. Her husband started to see some of the things she was going through and he started to support what she was saying.
Listen, your phone's going off. Someone agrees with you. Tom, let's see how you answer this. Who's done more damage to the royal family, Andrew or Meghan Harry?
Well, I think they both have. And the thing about Meghan and Harry is that they started even before the wedding. And the whole point is, if you read the book, Paulette, you'll see that before the wedding, a very, very famous member of the British establishment spent a lot of time with Meghan trying to explain to her the restraints, the limitations, the duties of being in the royal family. And that person then reported back to the Queen and Prince Philip that Meghan was troubled. She didn't want to stay. She was not going to be happy. It was going to end badly. You'll have to read the book. And so the damage started before the wedding. She was dissatisfied. And, of course, it's gone on.
You see her, her as more damaging than Andrew?
No, I mean, Andrew has been a disaster for the royal family. But,
yeah.
you know, both have been disasters.
Yeah.
And the royal family, because of both of them, has been severely weakened.
Hello, squaddies, and welcome back to Sussex Voices. Today, I want to talk about something that has become almost a genre of its own in British media: the endless retelling of the Harry and Meghan story through the lens of collapse, failure, betrayal, decline, and disaster. Recently, another conversation made the rounds, centred on a new royal biography and the now familiar set of claims about Prince Harry and Meghan Sussex. If you've followed royal coverage for any amount of time, the pattern probably feels familiar. A new book appears. Headlines are extracted. Anonymous perspectives become certainty. Assumptions become analysis. And somehow, despite years passing, Harry and Meghan are still presented as if every move they make must be interpreted as evidence that leaving royal life was a mistake. What stood out to me wasn't even the criticism itself. Public figures get criticised. That comes with visibility. What stood out was how confidently opinions were presented as facts. The conversation opened with the idea that Harry and Meghan's story is now one of decline, that after stepping away from royal duties, making deals, relocating to California, and building a different life, they are somehow struggling to justify their decision. But I think that framing reveals more about expectations than reality. Because there's something interesting happening here. When Harry and Meghan left, many people predicted they would disappear. Then they didn't. People predicted no one would care. Then millions watched. People predicted nobody would listen. Then interviews, documentaries, books, speeches, and appearances generated enormous attention. People predicted financial failure. Then they signed global deals. Now that years have passed and they still remain relevant, the language has shifted from "they'll fail" to "they're surviving but not thriving" to "their success isn't the right kind of success." At some point we should ask, what standard are they being judged against? Because if the standard is becoming richer than every Hollywood celebrity alive while simultaneously maintaining royal influence without participating in royal duties, that's not a real standard. That's moving the goalposts. One of the themes repeated in this discussion was money. The argument went something like this: they earned a lot, they spend a lot, and therefore things must be turning sour. But there's a strange contradiction in these conversations. On one hand, critics describe Harry and Meghan as irrelevant. On the other hand, they describe them as powerful enough to disrupt institutions, dominate headlines, secure global partnerships, attract audiences, influence public conversations, and reshape perceptions of monarchy. Which is it? Because those two stories cannot both be true. The reality is much less dramatic. Harry and Meghan made a choice. They left an institution. They moved countries. They became financially independent. That independence came with risk. And unlike working royals, they no longer operate with taxpayer-supported infrastructure. That includes security, that includes staff, that includes building ventures from scratch. People say they spend a lot on security. Well, yes. Prince Harry has spoken repeatedly about concerns surrounding safety. Concerns rooted in experiences that began long before Meghan entered his life. We cannot talk about Harry's protective instincts without acknowledging his history. This is someone whose mother's final years unfolded under extraordinary public pressure. This is someone who has spoken openly about trauma. Whether people agree with him or not, acting like security concerns, our vanity misses context. Then there was another criticism aimed directly at Meghan, the idea that she has tried to reinvent herself repeatedly. I always find that criticism fascinating because reinvention is celebrated in almost every other industry. Actors reinvent, entrepreneurs reinvent, public figures pivot. Women especially are often encouraged to evolve. But when Meghan changes direction, suddenly it becomes evidence of instability. She was criticised for acting, then criticised for leaving acting, criticised for podcasting, criticised for producing, criticised for speaking, criticised for staying quiet. At some point, the criticism becomes impossible to satisfy. And this is where I think people underestimate what Harry and Meghan actually represent to supporters. For many people, they are not symbols of perfection. They are symbols of choice. Choice to leave, choice to redefine success, choice to protect family, choice to reject expectations. That doesn't mean every decision they make is automatically correct, but it means their decisions are interpreted through a different lens than the one often presented. Another moment in the discussion focused on Meghan speaking publicly and accusations that she talks too much about herself. This criticism has followed her for years, and I think there's a broader question underneath it. When does sharing personal experience become self-centered? Because public speaking today often relies on storytelling. People connect through lived experience. Leaders talk about struggle. Founders talk about journeys. Advocates explain why issues matter to them personally. But somehow, when Meghan uses personal examples, the interpretation often becomes she's making it about herself. Now, could there be moments where speeches land differently than intended? Of course, that applies to everyone. But counting pronouns and turning that into character analysis feels less like critique and more like confirmation bias. Then we moved into the conversation around Harry's charity work. And this is where I think things deserve a more careful approach. One of the easiest narratives to sell is that if conflict happens inside an organisation, responsibility automatically belongs to the most famous person attached to it. But organisations evolve, leadership changes, disagreements happen, governance disputes happen. That doesn't automatically become proof of personal failure. Yet somehow every disagreement connected to Harry becomes transformed into a morality play. And once again, Meghan's presence becomes the explanation. That pattern is worth noticing. When things go well, Harry is capable. When things go wrong, Meghan influenced him. That framing removes agency from both of them. It portrays Harry as passive and Meghan as controlling. And honestly, I don't think either description respects who they are. Harry is not a child. He's not somebody who suddenly forgot how to make decisions. People spent years praising him as independent, compassionate, military-trained, committed to service, emotionally intelligent. But once his decisions became unpopular with certain audiences, suddenly he became manipulated. That shift deserves examination. Because supporting Harry means respecting that he can make choices people disagree with and still own those choices. And supporting Meghan means rejecting the idea that a woman marrying into power automatically becomes responsible for every institutional disagreement that follows. That narrative has existed for centuries, and it's worth questioning now. And then we arrive at what, for me, is the most revealing part of these conversations. Not the details of any single claim, but the language people choose. One of the most striking phrases repeated in the discussion was the suggestion that Meghan brainwashed Harry. That word gets thrown around so casually now that people rarely stop and think about what it actually implies. It implies Harry stopped being capable of independent thought. It implies that a man who served in the military, who spent decades inside one of the most scrutinized institutions in the world, who had relationships, friendships, responsibilities, charitable commitments and public duties before Meghan ever appeared in his life, suddenly became incapable of making decisions. And I think that idea deserves more scrutiny than it gets. Because what if Harry didn't change because someone manipulated him? What if Harry changed because life changed him? What if becoming a husband changed him? What if becoming a father changed him? What if losing his mother at a young age shaped how he thinks about family, privacy, media pressure and protection? What if years of experiences inside royal life created frustrations that already existed before Meghan arrived? These possibilities rarely get explored with the same intensity. Instead, the easier explanation becomes, Meghan arrived and everything went wrong. But human beings are more complicated than that. One thing that stood out to me during the conversation was how quickly criticism of Meghan turned into certainty about her motives. She wanted power. She wanted status. She wanted to be queen. She expected luxury. Those statements get delivered with extraordinary confidence, yet nobody can actually prove inner motives. What people often do instead is work backwards from outcomes. They see someone leave an institution and conclude they must have hated the institution. They see someone speak publicly and conclude they wanted attention. They see someone pursue business opportunities and conclude money was always the goal. But life rarely works in straight lines. People can appreciate opportunity and still struggle with parts of it. People can value family and still choose distance. People can want impact and also want independence. Those things can coexist. Then the discussion moved into race. And I think this is where conversations around Meghan become especially difficult because people tend to move into extremes. Either someone says every criticism is racism, or someone says race had absolutely nothing to do with anything. Reality is usually more complicated. One of the panelists made a point that I thought was important. Perception matters. That doesn't mean every uncomfortable interaction is racism, but it also means people experience situations differently. You don't have to agree with every conclusion Meghan reached to understand why being under intense scrutiny while becoming one of the most visible women in the world could feel isolating. You also don't have to believe Britain is uniquely intolerant to acknowledge that media narratives can shape how someone feels they are being received. Those are not mutually exclusive ideas, and I think that's where the conversation often breaks down. People hear criticism of media treatment and interpret it as criticism of an entire country. People hear discussions about race and immediately assume accusations. But maybe there's room for something more thoughtful. Maybe there's room to say, media pressure exists. Public fascination exists. Bias exists. Success exists. Privilege exists. Personal responsibility exists. All of those things can be true at once. Another thing that stayed with me was the comparison that eventually emerged in the discussion, asking whether Harry and Meghan damaged the monarchy more than others. And that question itself reveals something fascinating. Because what does damage actually mean? If raising concerns damages an institution, does that mean silence is healthier? If leaving damages an institution, does that mean people should remain unhappy? If disagreement damages an institution, does that mean institutions should never adapt? Those are difficult questions. And I think history shows that institutions survive criticism more often than they survive refusing to evolve. Now, that doesn't mean Harry and Meghan handled every moment perfectly. No public figure does, no family does, no institution does. But I do think there's a difference between disagreement and villainy. One thing I've noticed over the years is that Harry and Meghan often get treated as if they must justify their existence in a way others don't. If they produce content, people ask whether it succeeded enough. If they speak publicly, people ask whether they should speak at all. If they stay quiet, people ask where they've gone. If they launch projects, people question motives. If they don't launch projects, people call them irrelevant. That's an impossible standard. And yet, despite all of it, they remain visible. People still talk. Books still get written. Panels still debate them. Headlines still lead with them. That tells me something. Whether people support them or criticize them, Harry and Meghan still matter in public conversation. And maybe that's the real story. Not collapse, not destruction, not triumph, but transition. Two people trying to build a different life while carrying extraordinary levels of public attention. Will every venture work? Probably not. Will every decision age well? Probably not. But that's normal. Most of us just don't make mistakes in front of millions of people. For me, the bigger takeaway isn't whether every criticism is fair or unfair. It's asking whether we allow public figures to remain human. Can Harry be protective without being paranoid? Can Meghan be ambitious without being manipulative? Can disagreement with the monarchy exist without being betrayal? Can choosing another path simply be choosing another path? Those questions interest me more than another round of headlines. And ultimately, whatever people think of Harry and Meghan, I think their story says something bigger about our culture, about expectations, about identity, about family, about independence, about who gets permission to change. Now I want to hear from all of you. Do you think Harry and Meghan have been judged more harshly than other public figures? Do you think leaving royal life was the right decision? Do you believe the media narrative around them has changed over time, or stayed exactly the same? And what do you make of the idea that Harry was brainwashed versus the possibility that he simply made choices people didn't expect? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I always read them, and I love seeing the different perspectives this community brings. If you enjoyed this conversation, please like the video, subscribe to Sussex Voices if you haven't already, and share this episode widely so more people can join the discussion. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.